I'm going to bring in Kyle from Indiana, and he wants to talk about that there should be lines drawn on abortion. Kyle, hello.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call. I saw the poll question, and I'm not sure if murder is the right term because murder means unlawful. But if we want to talk about the abortion and when it's right and when it's wrong, I do have a couple opinions on that.
Okay.
Abortion tends to be a very broad term. It can last from conception all the way to birth. And I think that there should be some lines drawn as far as at what point does this fetus become a baby? Or, in a better way of saying that, becomes a human with rights, at least the United States. So that's where I'm at. I don't believe abortion should be legal across the board. I do think it's something that should be decided by a doctor. But I just, this idea that we can abort a fetus, baby child through its full term just doesn't settle right with me.
I don't think this is something that occurs, is it? I think we have that line in place already.
Where does a unborn child get aborted at full term?
There have been several examples, at least in modern times, that a child has went well into the third a pregnancy has went into the third trimester, and the baby is aborted, at least here in the United States.
Okay, I don't know of any off the top of my head. I admit, I think it's a horrible thing, right? You know, I would love to see children be born and everybody have a good life. I don't know what the nuances are as far as how far a child goes and where. But you said something incredibly interesting to me, or to Richard and I, when we were introducing this, and said, you do think it should be made by a medical professional, period. And I don't know where you're wrong about that. I mean, what we know now of abortion laws is that they are being made typically by elected officials or judges that, kind of sit for life on a court. And really the medical professional and the person who is hosting the life inside of them are being cut out of the decision-making process. And so I think that is what the debate is about. Drawing lines on abortion could very well be a product of having the ability to make that decision with your medical provider. But that is not even something that's possible right now. And so I think it's two kind of different conversations in a way. I don't know. What do you think about those thoughts so far, Kyle?
Well, you say, and yes, medical professionals should make the decision, but there are several regulations. The only people that can make laws are our politicians and legislatures. So there are current regulations put on medical professionals as far as what they can and can't do. So yes, it's their decision, but there has to be guidelines for them to fall within. I mean, doctors can't just give you any medication for any ailment. They have certain things they have to do, and it's through FDA regulation, at least I believe, here in the United States. So to say it is slightly a tangent subject, but you can't have a legal stance without getting politicians and legislature involved.
But the legals, the kind of this all came to a head pretty recently with the whole Roe versus Wade being overturned, and that was specifically a political decision, regardless of which side of the fence you're on, it was a political decision, and it's the medical professionals since then have kind of had their hands tied as to what they can do. Certainly in some states, you've got states like Florida, which are renowned for being absolute. I mean, I don't live in Florida. Jimmy can probably speak more on this than I can. Who's absolutely kind of appalling with kind of sticking in legislation which vastly undermines both doctors and people who are pregnant. Jimmy, you can speak probably a little bit more on Florida than I can. Did you notice anything down there?
Well, I did live in Florida, and in Florida, it's a tradition, or typically more Christian and more conservative, and so there are a lot of outspoken people and protests and things like that for making abortion illegal. Period. What I found interesting about that was that these same people, when there was talks about having possibly a COVID vaccination becoming mandated, were standing out on the corners in the same place with signs that said "My body, my choice." And I found it incredibly hypocritical to want to take rights away from somebody else over their own body, but then protest the very same argument for your own body. And so we always see this kind of thing happen with the more conservative Christian demographic. And I just don't really understand why they can't make the connection between abortion and having your own rights when they're experiencing those same fears and that same government toiling in their personal rights. So, yeah, we're not at a point where we can have conversations about the legal limits or what doctors are capable of. There is a monolithic line drawn in the United States here as to where abortion or where Roe v. Wade has been overturned, and states can take those rights away from people at will, not taking into account the circumstances of individual cases, the changing circumstances. I mean, we might sit here and say, well, it would be horrible to see an 8-month child not come to term. An 8-month pregnancy not come to term, but we aren't in the room with the doctor, with the pregnant woman, and unfortunately, neither are they, in a sense, right? So we're just not in a place where we can start drawing lines. We have to actually work backwards now, and I just want to close this out with: if you have any questions about COVID, refer to the CDC guidelines.
Okay, and if I may, isn't it just as equally hypocritical for somebody that's for mandatory vaccines, claiming bodily autonomy, then turning around and saying, "Well, I have the right to an abortion"? I mean, there's hypocrisy on both sides of this argument. And that, I think, is what makes it so complex to even get to any rational discussion on the subject, because it does seem like it is very divided. You either have people that are pro-abortion or anti-abortion. I tend to fall in the middle of that and believe there's probably an appropriate time for it, but then there are also times that it is immoral. I mean, we're taking the life of potentially another human being, and in that, you're violating that person's rights to life and due process as far as that goes.
When did this become an anti-vax call? Let's not go down the anti-vax route, because
sorry, I did that. That's my bad.
Okay. Let's kind of try and stay on project, especially seeing as that anti-vax route is kind of a sore point with me because my mum died of COVID. So let's not do that because she'll get quite a lot of pushback on that. And she was an anti-vaxxer as well. Yeah. But I think on the subject we're talking about, look, I'd like to see these cases you kind of cite in the third trimester, because I think it's very rare that anything happens in the third trimester which isn't kind of a medical emergency. And it's abortion is a nuanced issue. It's not just a case of someone walks in and decides suddenly they don't want a baby, and then that's it. There are cases of that which happen early in pregnancy, which are the person's right who is pregnant. But in later pregnancy, it's usually down to kind of medical emergencies and things. So let's not just kind of throw everything in one basket and say abortion bad. You're kind of called in with saying, let's draw a line. And as I said at the top of the call, I think there are lines in place. And I think that's very important to acknowledge. And it's also, while we're kind of us three, guys talking on the subject, I think it's all very important to acknowledge that neither of us, none of the three of us, are likely ever going to actually be pregnant. So it's not a thing that we can talk on really from any authority at all. I'm not a medical professional. I don't think Jimmy is. I'm not sure about the caller, Kyle, but
I am not either.
Yeah, so I think it's a very important subject to kind of have discussions about. But personally, I would feel much more comfortable if there was kind of an expert in the room kind of thing to have that discussion with, whether it's someone who is likely to become pregnant or has the ability to become pregnant, or a medical professional who has to deal with this. And I think the biggest point that I've been trying to make through this kind of entire thing is they're not the people who are making the decisions. It's the politicians who are making the decisions. And that's where my kind of pushback on this whole thing comes. And, I kind of agree with what you said earlier on, in a way, Kyle, when you said, it is the medical profession, it should be the medical professional and the pregnant person who are making these decisions, but it's not. It's legislation, which is largely informing how we go forward with this. So, I think there is a line in place. In some ways, I agree with you. In others, I don't. I'd have to look into it a lot more. But I'd also like to have someone in the room with us who does know a lot more about it. I recommend you phone back when Dr. Ben's on. He'll be on in a couple of weeks. And I think if you give us a call back, keep your eye on it and set a reminder and give us a call back when Dr. Ben's on, who can really probably give you some informed information on this subject. I'll let you kind of have the last word, Kyle, and then we'll let you go.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just to come back to what you just said about medical professionals, there are medical professionals on both sides of this argument. There are OBGYNs that are absolutely against abortion, and then there are others that are for it. So if you're going to have medical professionals, you should probably have one from both sides of the line. I'm not going to take up any more time because I don't think we're really going to go any farther with this conversation. I just wanted to call because it was the poll question. I have an opinion on it, even though I will never be pregnant. And I thought I would just lay my opinion out here, since that's what this show is sort of all about. And
yeah, absolutely.
For your time, you gentlemen have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you too. And stick around to listen to the next caller, because this might inform you a little bit more as well. Thanks for your call, Kyle.